Yolanda, I've been investigating this man for years now, and even I was quite surprised at what we found on Hardin this time. At least a dozen complaints filed against him since 2016 with the Ohio Board of Embalmers and Funeral Directors. One complaint says a body was so decomposed the skin was slipping off and mothballs were used to help eliminate the odor of death. Another complaint says a worker at a cemetery in Akron got sick after Hardin showed up in an old rusty van with a body for burial that had a pronounced smell of decomposition. This is a quite tangled web, and those involved say the answers are somewhere between deceit and greed.
The funeral industries work very hard to try to accommodate families, grieving families of deceased.
Death is a natural part of life, but it's also a business. Marvin Johnson owns Johnson Mortuary Transport. He says in the past, he's dealt with Shawnte Hardin.
He introduced himself to me as being a funeral director and an embalmer who owned two funeral homes, one in Akron and another one in Warren.
Hardin has never been licensed as a funeral director in Ohio, nor as an embalmer. Johnson thinks Hardin's business practices sometimes skirted Ohio law.
What he would do was allow the funeral home to do a licensed funeral home to do the embalming, and then he would come in from that part and ask for a transfer of the deceased to his care.
In a week's time, back in 2017, a civil lawsuit shows that exact thing happened several times here at Dill Whitaker Funeral Services in Columbus, which raised a red flag. Eventually, the owner accused Hardin of costing him time and money.
He's gotten away with it for so long. I just think Shawnte began to think he was invincible.
Marlon Gary owns Marlon Gary Funeral Homes. He's known Shawnte since he was a teen. While he's worked in several funeral homes, Gary says Hardin lacks the professional training to care for the dead.
There was one instance where he picked up a deceased from our funeral home. He picked him up in a minivan. He did not have a gurney, so he transported the human remains from my gurney into the back of his van with a coffee table turned upside down, the four legs sticking up, in order to support the body from moving around in the back of his van.
Despite knowing his past and a lack of a state license, Gary says his hands have been tied when dealing with Hardin.
In Ohio, you can't hold a body, what we say, for ransom. If a family wants to move a body, they have every right to do so.
State investigators say Hardin told families he was associated with a licensed funeral director with the Islamic Church, now living in Maryland. The doctor told investigators he knows Hardin, but never agreed to allow him to use his name and license number at free will.
Who knows who's embalming for him? Maybe that's something that will come out in this investigation.
According to family interviews with state investigators, on several occasions, Hardin would transfer bodies here to Donovan Funeral Home near Akron. It's the same business fined in the past for associating with Shawnte Hardin. After several unreturned calls to the owner, we showed up to get answers.
This is Andrew Kinsey with WBNS.
Yeah, he's not in. I can have him give you a call.
Yes, can I leave my number?
Sure can.
The owner never called back. Some families we spoke with say they can't put their dealings with Hardin behind them because they have questions about cremated remains they received and death certificates still missing.
How does another human being look at themselves and says that that's okay? It just boggles my mind.
As former mayor of Toledo, where Hardin once did business, State Representative Paula Hicks Hudson is familiar with his name. She's outraged by Hardin's ability to build a business enterprise using what she says are loopholes in the state law.
It makes no sense that families who are grieving, hurting, will be taken advantage of in such a way.
Hicks Hudson is now pushing for legislation to ensure there are stronger requirements and oversight for those dealing with the dead and harsher legal action for those caught operating without a license.
We've got it drafted. Now we just got to get it to to the other, like to the funeral board and some other places, for them to look at it and to give me their opinions as to whether or not this is going to address that particular issue.
Hicks Hudson is not the only lawmaker looking to address gray areas in the state law when it comes to funeral-related practices. A comprehensive bill already in the Senate is getting favorable action and support from the state board. Tonight, Hardin is out on bond on house arrest. He has been ordered not to accept money from families or engage in funeral-related activities, which includes transporting bodies. His attorney tells me Hardin helped people through a difficult and expensive process within the boundaries of the law. They are currently preparing for trial, which is set to begin on February 7th.